There are lots of different types of hypnotherapy, and of course, I only know about mine, so I'm going to stick to my lane. There are all sorts of avenues of hypnotherapy, and you're totally right in that the science almost gives people permission to go, oh, it's okay then. We marry it with talk therapy, which is all solution focused. So we begin our sessions with talking about what's been good. They bring along their notes from the week and tell me what's been good or what they've been proud of. And whilst they're talking about this, it produces lots of serotonin. This gets them into the intellectual part of the brain where they can do some problem solving and feel relaxed, emotionally distant and rational.
It's my absolute pleasure to introduce an inspiring guest today, someone who has not only transformed her own life, but is now dedicated to helping others do the same. Keira Smith began her journey as a fitness instructor, but behind the scenes, she faced overwhelming personal struggles, an abusive childhood, brain surgery left her visually impaired, devastating loss and fertility challenges. At one point, she found herself in a dark place, feeling trapped with no way out. But Keira's story doesn't end there. Through sheer determination and an open mind, she discovered solution-focused hypnotherapy, a powerful method that helped her break free from emotional blocks without endlessly revisiting past traumas. The impact was so profound that Keira dedicated herself to mastering the science of behavioral change. Now, as a positive behavioral change hypnotherapist, Keira empowers and enables others to overcome stress, anxiety, and negative habits, guiding them towards a future they once thought was out of reach. Her passion is helping people reclaim their lives, not by dwelling on the past, but by focusing on practical, forward-thinking solutions. So please join me in welcoming the incredible Keira Smith. Keira, welcome.
Oh, thank you, Peter. What a wonderful introduction. That's just fantastic. And I'm delighted to be here.
Let's dive into your transition from personal training and yoga to hypnotherapy. It seems to represent more than just a career change. It appears to be a profound personal transformation. Can you walk us through the moment or the rising realization when you first experienced the power of solution-focused hypnotherapy, and how has it changed your perspective on healing?
I knew I wanted a career change, and through various channels, hypnotherapy came to me out of nowhere, really. I was so fortunate that the course that was local to me was a solution-focused hypnotherapy course. I spoke to the lecturer, whose name is Gary, who is still a supervisor and big mentor of mine. He explained what it was, and I thought, oh, it was like a sigh of relief. That sounds really amazing. And I'd been watching a lot of law of attraction videos on YouTube. The universe had been giving them to me. So I'd started to learn about the power of changing your thoughts and how that changes everything, absolutely everything. When I attended my solution-focused hypnotherapy course for the first couple of days, and Gary explained all the neuroscience behind what we do and what we educate people with, it was this enormous light bulb moment where all the pieces came together, all the law of attraction information. It was this meeting of the universe and neuroscience. It was just this amazing package that felt like I'd gone into this kind of HD world at the end of that weekend, because it all just clicked into place. It was like, why hasn't anyone told me this before? It was incredible. I remember Gary saying, this course will change your life and the lives of everyone around you. However, and I would say this is the same for all my clients who come to me, you think, yes, I know I need to make some changes, but you're never quite aware of the extent or the nature of what is going to come and what you're going to start dismantling and putting back together.
That's beautiful. And the stars clearly aligned for you.
Yes, very much, Peter. I feel very guided towards what I do now, as there are so many different channels to help people through. This is the one that I've been guided towards and I'm using.
You mentioned neuroscience. Behind hypnotherapy, the neuroscience I find particularly fascinating. It's known that during hypnotic states, brain imaging shows an increased activity in areas associated with focused attention and reduced activity, especially in the default mode network, the part responsible for mind wandering.
Yes.
How do you explain this scientific foundation to clients who might be skeptical about
Yeah.
hypnotherapy's effectiveness?
Of course, you're absolutely right. There are so many people who are hesitant, maybe a little bit scared. They think, what's going to happen to me during that hypnotic state? And the first thing that I tell them is, it is simply a deep relaxation. The brain is deeply relaxing. Sometimes this can feel very strange because when you've been stressed for a long time, you may not have ever been in that state before. So it can feel very strange. We explain how the brain waves are slowing down. So depending on how tired they are or how stressed they are, you might sink down to the creative alpha waves, or you might go all the way down to the gamma waves where you'll go to sleep. Once I start to show them on a diagram, this is how it's going to happen. You're going to be relaxing and able to let go. There could be all sorts of images coming into your head. Your brain is sifting and sorting all the stuff there so that when you go to sleep tonight, during REM sleep, it can do lots of processing much easier than it could have done before you did this relaxation or trance, as we call it. And that seems to people, because we're giving them neuroscience, delivering it in a nutshell format they can understand. People are, oh, okay, I didn't realize it was that. They think, okay, if it's scientific and you're not going to mess with my brain, let's give it a go. And then they realize this feels great. I can relax finally.
It's great because they can have the personal experience, but they can marry it with scientific credibility, which is fantastic. It's important. We'll go into a relaxation class and do meditation and relax all our muscles. So why not relax the brain? I think it's because of the ancillary nonsense that's associated with it.
That's it. There are lots of different types of hypnotherapy. And of course, I only know about mine, so I'm going to stick to my lane. There are all sorts of avenues of hypnotherapy. And you're totally right in that the science almost gives people permission to go, oh, it's okay then. We marry it with talk therapy, which is all solution focused. So we begin our sessions with talking about what's been good. They bring along their notes from the week and tell me what's been good or what they've been proud of. And whilst they're talking about this, it produces lots of serotonin. This gets them into the intellectual part of the brain where they can do some problem solving and feel relaxed, emotionally distant and rational. Then we do a couple of other exercises and then the relaxation. So by the time we get to the relaxation, their brain has made an inroad into feeling relaxed, feeling settled, and then they can really make the most of that. You can see that they think, oh, I've done my work and now I get to relax. So it's quite a nice, lets them off the hook, I suppose, is the way I see it.
You give them a permission slip because for many people it's irrational in a lot of ways because people don't understand it. So you have to bring rationality into it. It's almost like you have to give it a rational title in order to pursue the irrational.
Absolutely. I really do feel that, Peter. I feel that with solution focused hypnotherapy, if you are a real hard logical person, it will work for you because it's process and action driven. If you're an in-between person like me, my head is in the clouds, my feet are on the ground, it works great. And if you are completely towards the spiritual and much more of that loose flowing way, it also works for you because although there's a structure, within that structure, there's lots of freedom to talk about what's important to you rather than following someone else's procedure of what should be good and what should work for you.
In order to have freedom, you need form. You also mentioned stress is the killer of all progress. From a neurobiological perspective, I know that chronic stress can reshape our neural pathways and affect everything from memory to decision making.
Yeah.
How does solution-focused hypnotherapy specifically address these stress-induced changes in the brain?
Couple of different ways, Peter. The first one is we give our clients two exercises to do between their sessions. One is listening to the relaxation, which allows the brain to relax. The second one is writing down what's been good every single day. It's not what's been good from someone else's point of view, it's what's been good from their point of view. It's a very personal thing. This, done regularly, starts to redirect the brain. At first, it can be like pushing a boulder up a hill for some people, because we live in a very negative culture. Nobody asks you what's been good. When I say this to people, some of the clients look at me and think, oh my God, they look at the terror. What am I going to write down? What am I going to do? They could be in a really dark place. I say to them, just start with the very easiest things. The sun is shining. I had a nice cup of tea. This starts to regularly create serotonin. It might be very small at first, but it's turning the brain away from the primitive fight-flight area and into the intellectual, rational, solution-focused area. So it's regularly turning it back in the right direction. Now, our neural pathways we use all the time are like the M1. Our traffic goes fast up them and we instantly go for them. That's when we react. We're like straight up the M1. That takes us where we need to go.
For the American audience,
Oh,
the
I'm
M1,
so
the
thank
freeway.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Peter. I
It's
was
all
just
right.
going to say, is it freeway? I couldn't remember, so I'm really grateful for that. Thank you. So they travel really fast, but sometimes our motorways and freeways are not helpful neural pathways. When we start to constantly redirect the brain, our thoughts start to change and then our behaviors can start to change. When those two things start to become different, we start to build new neural pathways. So the way I explain it to people is we're starting to build the smaller roads around those motorways. Now, if we use those small roads enough and we stop using the motorways and the freeways, eventually our brain will go, oh, you don't need this anymore. It literally clears it away and cleans it away as we sleep, gets rid of it. But obviously that takes practice, which is why we get them to write down what's been good in between the sessions every single day. So it's building those habits of the brain and strengthening those new neural pathways.
That explains more of the physiological basis of your
Yes.
work, and shifting people from the what's wrong mentality to the what works mentality. It's important. You need an ecology of practices, not just
Yes.
tools. You've got to be consistent with it in order
Yes.
to build those neural pathways. Like you say, it's a bit like lifting a weight. If you lift a weight, the muscle goes, oh, he may do that or she may do that again. Better strengthen the muscle or lay down more
Yes.
tissue. But if you just leave it, then it has no desire to respond.
Yeah. Of course, if we've been in a depressed state for a long time, our brain starts to get rid of serotonin receptors because it
Yeah.
thinks, well, you don't need them. Like you say about picking up that weight, it can literally feel like that to begin with. But like you say, that habit, the brain starting to gather evidence, oh, we can do it. Let's try it again. Again, goes back to what you said about freedom within a form. So there is a loose form of write down what's been good or what you've been proud of or what's been different. Then they have the freedom to go, that's all about me. One guy said, oh, so I can literally boast about what I've been doing. And I was like, if it's true, then yes, as long as you're not making it up.
The
Like what?
form is the earth element that gives
Yes.
them the grounding for fire and air to be able to be propositional.
But there's a metaphor we use in one of our language patterns that I read to my clients, and it's all about trees. We use metaphors because the brain learns really well through stories. It's like advice. What you should do is this. It's all about a little tree talking to a big tree. The big tree envies the little tree because it can wave its arms in the breeze and have a lovely time. The little tree is talking about perspective, and your roots go down really deep in the ground. You can let yourself wave in the breeze. It's that earth element, keeping them grounded so they can enjoy themselves and wave in the breeze.
I love that. The strength of a tree depends on its flexibility to bend with the wind. You mentioned that practice is important, the consistency is important. In
Yeah.
whatever field you're in, when you go to the gym, there might be 20 pounds or 20 kilos on the bar. And it's
Yes.
not the fact you can't lift it, it's the fact you haven't developed the muscle to lift it. You need that patterning in your neural pathways and the
Absolutely.
establishment to be able to lift that bar. Eventually, your nervous system can fire and go, yeah, I can do
Yes,
that.
let's go. That is such a good point, Peter. I get a lot of clients come to me because they've been to a lot of other places and it hasn't worked for them. The main reason they've found things difficult in help from other places is that they're like, I know I need to get to there. I've been told I just need to go there and I don't know how to go there. With solution-focused hypnotherapy, we do something called the miracle question each session. We find the next tiny little step. So one lady came to me, she was setting up a business. In her miracle question, she had her thing of what she wanted to achieve that week. Okay, what's the very first step? Opening my laptop at 9 a.m. tomorrow. So it gives the brain that one absolutely tiny step. And as Peter, from your background in fitness and things, once someone's done a little bit, they think, oh, I can do a little bit more now. Oh, I could push myself a little bit further now, because you've triggered a little bit of dopamine, a little bit of serotonin, but you've let yourself off the hook, like you said about the permission slip. I only need to do this. Okay, we can manage that. Then, of course, they're chuffed, they're proud because they've done it. And then they have created evidence and go, maybe I can do a bit more, which is why we get them to write it down. So that on the times when their stress bucket gets more full and it's a worse day, they've got a bank of evidence to go back to and go, I did manage it and I did do it before, which is why if a client comes into me and goes, oh, I've had an awful week, I'm like, okay, sit down. What's been helping you get through the week and see me? Because there's going to be something, because they're still alive. So they've done something right.
That's the wonderful thing about the work you're doing. You're moving them from pathology to process.
That's it, yeah.
Right? You're moving them from the what's wrong mentality, like, oh, I've had an awful week, to what promotes them, which is what's one thing that's helped you. It's promoting them as distinct from preventing them. Another intriguing aspect of your approach is the idea that you can solve a problem without talking about it. This seems to contradict traditional therapeutic approaches. Can you elaborate on how this paradoxical approach works in practice, particularly in terms of creating sustainable behavioral change?
Yes, it's a wonderful thing. We talk to our clients about the stress bucket. This is another really easy way for clients to imagine, in a very easy visual way, all the stuff that has happened through their life going into a bucket. That can be grief, trauma, but negative thoughts are a huge one. It's not just big lumps, it's death by 1,000 paper cuts as well. All the negative thoughts that we have get converted into anxiety, and they all go in that bucket as well. If we're not being aware of what we're putting in the bucket and letting other people put too much stuff in the bucket, then that bucket gets full. That's why people come to me or go to a counsellor or any kind of talk therapist or healer. All that stuff in your stress bucket, that's all memories and thoughts that you've put in there. Now that needs to be processed. Now, in order to process it, we don't need to talk about it. What we need to do is help you improve your sleep, because sleep is where all of those memories, whether it's a bad day at work or part of severe trauma, is getting moved and processed during your REM sleep. Each sleep cycle we have 90 minutes. Last 20% of that is our REM sleep. That's when we dream. And not everyone remembers their dreams, but we do all dream. We have all sorts of weird templates for processing things out of our stress bucket. So our dreams sometimes are literal and sometimes they're completely random. But during that time, those memories, that stuff out of that stress bucket is getting moved from the primitive fight-flight brain, where we're reactive to it, into our intellectual brain, where we're not reactive to it. A quick example of this is, lady came to me. She'd had a car crash when she was 18, never really driven since. She was in her 30s, 2 kids, another one on the way, needed to get back in the car. After 6 or 7 sessions, she was driving on her own, but she came across a car crash. This is something which obviously before would have put her into a complete spin, panic attack, would have frozen. She didn't. She drove past it and carried on, because enough had moved out of her stress bucket for her to have emotional distance from it. If I'd have brought her back in and we'd have talked about her car crash and all the bad stuff, all of that stuff would have gone back in her stress bucket and she would have to process it all over again. This was an absolute light bulb moment for me, because I'm like, yes, the instant I stop talking about everything that's wrong, I feel so much better. It goes really against traditional talk therapies and what we're told that we need to talk through a problem. And yes, sometimes we need to talk through a problem. But when people really want to move past that problem, getting REM sleep in better quality is absolutely pivotal, which is why we ask them to listen to the relaxation as they go to sleep. but also writing down what's been goods every day, retraining the brain, as we were talking about. But it also clears the mind, starts to make them think more rationally. Then they can start to understand the things around them that are not helping them. That's when the penny really drops for people. They'll notice toxic relationships or aspects of their job that they could change, or things they are allowing to go in that stress bucket. And of course, when we become aware of that, and when we can settle more into that solution focused state, which is not pretending everything's okay all the time, it means feeling relaxed and confident enough to deal with it, we can move past what's in our stress bucket. We can process it, it can go, and then it can stop bothering us. Hopefully that's explained it.
The example of the lady driving past a car crash, she's not triggered into reactivity
Yes.
based on a historical mechanism, which has now been cleaned up.
Yeah.
And the very fact that she's able to be the observer, being in a position of neutrality so
That's
that she's
it.
not affected either way. If you get a triangle and you've got positive and negative at the bottom of each side and neutral at the top, if you're in a position of neutrality and you look down, you can see both sides of things. You can see the negative and the positive. But if
Yes.
you are stuck in the positive or the negative in arguments, when
Yes.
you get the positive and negative
Yes.
charge fighting each other, when
Yes.
you come into an observer state, you are at a point of neutrality where you see both sides of it. So you can observe and be a compassionate witness, which I
Yes.
think is a beautiful thing. And you mentioned sleep, and this is huge
Mhm.
because sleep issues are increasingly common in our modern world. You've mentioned this as one of your areas of expertise. What has your clinical experience revealed about the relationship between hypnotic states, sleep patterns, and mental well-being?
Something I always say to my clients is your sleep is literally the bedrock of everything. It affects memory, heart health. I'm sure come across so many people with bad sleep. What our trance does, so if you're in a position where you're having terrible sleep and you're struggling to sleep, the relaxation that we give people that allows their brain to slip into trance. So trance is a state we naturally slip into every 7 minutes. It is when we're staring out the classroom window at the sky. Our brains are trying to catch up. You know, those boring meetings where you're falling asleep. That's trance. So what our relaxation does is allow the brain to drop into that state, but for 20 odd minutes. What this does is it replicates that REM sleep. So it allows the brain to have a taster of REM and to sift and sort that stress bucket out. So almost like tidying a desk before the REM sleep puts everything from the desk back on the shelves. That is how we explain it to people, how hypnotherapy directly links into their well-being and directly links into their sleep, because they can use that trance whenever they want, providing they're not listening to it 10 times a day, because the brain is working very hard in REM sleep. So we don't want the brain to be working too hard and them listening to it all the time. But if they have a big meeting coming up, they have a job interview, they know that they've got that to listen to just previous, so that their brain can organize itself a little bit better. They can be in, as you say, that neutral, rational state. And when they go to bed at night, things are in better order. They can sleep better. And as they come out of that sleep into the next day, things are in better balance. Obviously, not just in their mind, in their body. Every single cell of their body has benefited so much from that. And it can take a bit of time. Although I have had clients who are struggling with sleep and they listen to that relaxation for the first time and they are completely gone to the world because their body is in such desperate need of proper rest. I hope that's answered your question.
You're talking about sleep hygiene, where we have more of a ceremonic value about sleep.
Definitely.
We tend to fall into bed and it doesn't become ceremonic. And I'm not saying, oh, we've got to light candles and burn incense and pray, but you can do that. There are certain
Absolutely.
things that I do where I'll have some quiet time before I go to
Definitely.
sleep. I'll do a backward cascade of the day. I'll look
Yeah.
back at the day and go, okay, what has worked in the day? What am I grateful for? I'll also project for the next day and say, okay, tomorrow, this is what I'm going to project for. And then I just give it to my chief how officer. And
Yeah.
right, I don't try and analyze it. I just think, okay, give it out from there. let's see what happens in the morning. It doesn't mean I just sit there and contemplate my navel. I take actions, obviously. What I'm saying is I'm marrying intention with
Yes.
action.
Absolutely. We say exactly the same thing to our clients. For people who want the more scientific explanation, we say you're planting seeds into your reticular activating system, which is your sort of Google search of your brain. Once you've put the seed in there, like you say, Peter, you bring that thought into your head, that reticular activating system will notice things it wouldn't have noticed before.
It gets on the
And
frequency of
it
things.
gets,
If you want to buy an Audi TT, you
yes,
start seeing Audi TTs everywhere.
exactly. And notice a showroom you'd never noticed before because you weren't looking for Audi TTs.
Exactly. That's where, in the work that you're doing, whilst there is chemistry involved, it becomes more frequency based as distinct from chemistry
Yes.
based.
Yeah, definitely. Because people start to feel what it feels like and they start to go with what feels good and notice what feels bad. And they start to listen more and listen to their intuition. One young girl that came to me, she was 17 when she said this, and it's always stuck with me. She said, I'm becoming more of an advocate for myself. I just thought that was wonderful from such a young person as well. They become more frequency based, more flow based.
Mm.
What feels good on the days that didn't feel good, what didn't work for me, let's chuck that out and reevaluate as well. Okay, this worked for 6 weeks, now it's not feeling quite so good, let's think about what I want to do now.
I was mentioning this to a guest the other day that things go through three vectors. You have the expendable ray of life, which is you got to get up in the morning, take a pee.
Yeah.
You've got to get rid of things. You have the maintenance phase. You got to have a shower, eat, look after the house, pay the bills, and so on. You also have the custodial aspect. What do you want to be custodial to? This young lady sounds like she is being more sovereign, being an advocate by being custodial, as
Yes.
distinct from being expendable. You could only be in two-thirds of something at one time. If you look at your finger, it's got one, two, three parts,
Three
but I
parts.
can only
Absolutely.
move two-thirds of it at one time. In similar fashion, conscious, semi-conscious, unconscious, you can only be in two-thirds of it in one time. Your
Yes.
arm has got three parts to it, but you can only move two-thirds of it at one time. The
You're
tree you
absolutely right.
mentioned, two-thirds of it, one-third's
Yeah.
under the ground. So there's a two-thirds, one-third principle at play here.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You are absolutely on the money.
Your background in both physical disciplines like yoga and mental practices like hypnotherapy, I see gives you a unique perspective on mind-body integration. How do you see these different modalities complementing each other in the pursuit of overall wellness?
Yeah, I think exactly as you just said, the link between physical and mental, because of my physical experiences. So, brain tumor when I was 11, had brain surgery, it took away a lot of my peripheral vision. Unfortunately, that led to me adapting. And now I live a perfectly normal life other than not driving, but that takes a physical toll on your body. You have to work much harder and you end up holding tension and anxiety and things. That's given me a real understanding because I meet a lot of clients who might not realize they're stressed because stress is different for all of us, but they're having a very physical reaction. So it could be hair falling out or terrible headaches or their legs aren't working properly. I've had so many people with so many different things. Through being a personal trainer, having met all sorts of people through that, and my own personal experiences, and now the extended neuroscientific knowledge of the fact that the two things are just so completely married up. The difference, people will come to me and say, I've just realized that I've stopped, a physical tick might have stopped, or I can use my right arm properly again because of that mental messaging that's going between the two. Recently in neuroscience, there's a huge discovery of something called functional neurological disorder. This kind of explains when you hear about people who say, I've gone blind in one eye and there's no physical reason for it, and the doctors cannot tell me why, or I'm having seizures, but there's absolutely no physical reason why this is happening. And it's when this functional neurological disorder has kicked in because of stress, the messages between mind and body have become so jumbled that the body just goes, bleh, I'm going to do something to try and stop you from continually going into these dangerous situations. So I think my feelings and understanding of that integral state we're living in is both from me physically doing it and watching other people through my previous job in yoga and personal training. Now I feel like it's all come together and I can actually do something to help these people get past. And you touched on unhelpful habits and behaviors. When we're very stressed, our bodies develop odd coping mechanisms, and some of those could be physical. When we start releasing all that stress and our body starts to learn, I don't need to do those things anymore. I can cope. I don't need to flinch every time someone comes near me, or clench my fist all the time, which is another thing someone was doing who came to me. And it's that kind of unlearning. Those two things are so interlinked. That is not recognized in Western medicine. That's the big missing link.
It's important to understand stress kills progress, and neuroscience shows chronic stress shrinks the hippocampus, our brain's learning and memory center, whilst enlarging the amygdala, which is the fear and surveillance center. How does this biological reality shape your approach to helping clients break free from stress cycles?
It really shaped me in the way I look at people, because I have an awful lot of compassion for it. I've walked that walk. I've had to adapt. I've gone through extreme physical stress. It shapes my language, the way I explain things to people, and it shapes the environment that I create for people. So for people who haven't felt they could tell what they're telling me to anybody else, and they might be embarrassed, or they might have hang-ups about it, or they might have concealed it for years and years from people because they have a lot of shame about it. So it's given me a huge amount of empathy and compassion for all the clients that come and see me. Sometimes their story unravels quite slowly. Once they trust me a bit more, they drop another bomb. That might have been something they haven't told anybody else. That's an utter privilege for them to feel okay, but from my own life, know the weight of that. I think it really helps me to help them to feel acknowledged and listened to. What I do is all about helping people get back in control of themselves rather than the outside world. I know how that feels. I really know how that feels.
I salute your courage, because you've had that visceral experience. You have boots on the ground. It's not an academic pursuit for you. What I've noticed in terms of patterns of behavior is that good leaders, effective leaders, have empathy. Not only are you creating a safe space for clients to come into, you're also facilitating a brave space for people to be fully self-expressed. And that takes time, and that takes leadership.
You're completely right. Giving people space to become confident again. Really fantastic way to put it. And to go, hang on, why am I doing this? Why have I just those little light bulb moments of bravery and courage? That's exactly it.
In your experience working with stress patterns, you've observed how differently stress manifests in each individual.
Yes.
Can you share some surprising or counterintuitive sources of stress you've discovered in your practice that people might not recognize in themselves?
That is a really good question.
I'm trying to explore the nuanced nature of how stress manifests itself.
I think one big thing is people coping really well, overdoing. Mums, for instance, doing everything, doing it really well, but at what cost? You've come to me and you're sat in my chair, but I do all this really well. I'm not stressed because I'm doing all of this. I just can't sleep very well, or my back hurts all the time. I think the physical aspects, your body will find a way to tell you. I have had a lot of that, of particularly women. I'm doing everything and I'm doing it all really well. They're almost quite angry with me when I explain the brain to them, which I'm literally explaining it. So I'm never like, you need to do this. That's probably one of the biggest things, is that I think because the rest of the world is looking at them going, aren't they fantastic? They're doing everything. They're bringing up 3 kids. They've got a job. They bake all the time. They're cooking. They're in loads of groups. They're on the school committee. The model mum. And of course, that can be exactly the same for dads as well. I'm not taking away from that at all. But I'd say the overdoer, and I know this from my own experience, if they were to say to people, I'm not coping, people would go, oh, but you are, you're doing really well. You do everything, you're amazing. And then they think, oh, I can't say that I'm struggling. That's when they end up coming to me. And one lady who was in that situation who came to me, one of the biggest things that lessened her load was when, say, her husband offered to put the washing out, was stopping herself for a minute and just saying yes. No, he didn't put it out perfectly like she did. But one of the most significant things she said to me was, I've just thought to myself, it's out, the washing's out. That's all that matters. And I need to walk away now and just leave that and let people step in.
Many of your clients come to you after trying other approaches without success. What unique aspects of hypnotherapy make it particularly effective for people who haven't found relief through more traditional methods?
One of the biggest things is they're not going to have to talk about the trauma or problem again. I have had people burst into tears of joy. They're not going to have to go through the whole story over and over again. That's a burden off their shoulders already. The second one is I'm going to give them a physical thing, the relaxation, which they can literally just go home and put on and they can listen to it. So immediately they feel supported. I'm giving them something to help them when they're not with me. I'm giving them a tool to use. What I say to people, and it's on my website, is I'm going to ask you for half an hour of your time per day, and 25 minutes of that is lying down listening to relaxation. They immediately feel, okay, I've been asked to do these two things. During their initial consultation, given them a brain explanation. So they immediately go away with information. One chap said to me, you're the only therapist that's told me something I don't know. You're the only person that has explained to me why, not just why I feel so terrible, what we're actually going to do about it. Because it's great knowing why you feel like that, but people are like, I just want to do something about it now and I want to change. And I think those are the main points that people feel like immediately I can go home and I can do something that will make me feel a little bit better. I'm not asking them to keep coming back to me for years and years. Most people come and see me for 6 sessions after their initial consultation. Because of the type of therapy, it is enabling them to build a toolkit rather than them needing to keep coming back to me. One lady said to me, oh, I thought I would dip down between each session and then I need the session to pick me back up. But actually, I've gone up a little bit further after each session. She had 6 sessions and then 6 months later she came back for a top up. And that's what some people do. We call it a brain massage. People will just come back, their stress bucket might have filled up a bit and they just need a little reminder, a little top up, and off they go again. That's where it differs. They're not becoming reliant on me, they're learning to be reliant on themselves.
Which is great because you're not building codependency, you're facilitating an infrastructure for interdependency. They can become not only the mechanic, but the gardener as well, because the mechanic will want to fix something, and you need that. You need to know how to screw bolt A onto bolt B. You also need the gardener to be able to tend to their inner garden, to make things grow, to make sure that the soil has been cultivated for those skills to take root, to be able to plant the seeds, to cross-fertilize things. So it's not just a question of fixing it, which is what clients will, okay, what do I do about it? How do I fix it? You've got to become a gardener. That's what I see you're doing is you're facilitating how to be a good gardener so you can tend to your inner garden. You're giving them a practical toolkit of understanding as distinct from a rule book of behavior.
That's it. And you've really highlighted that beautifully, Peter. That is why some approaches haven't worked for them, because they've been told what to do, they've done it and it hasn't worked. Then they feel ashamed and sad and they don't know what to do. So you're completely right. The word gardener is a great way to describe it because they're learning what works and what doesn't work. Because their brains are getting into a better place, those pennies are dropping. Like I had a lady come to me this week and she'd had a massive epiphany all on her own about her behavior and a relationship in her life. So they're having those great epiphanies.
That's part of the issue is people are looking to be fixed and they don't want to be the gardener because being a gardener, you are vulnerable to weather patterns. You're vulnerable to whether it's going to, especially in the UK, get rained on
Yes.
consistently. There is uncertainty about it. So you have to plan, you have to project, you have to understand more about how you're arranged. This goes
Yeah.
back to ancient Greece, the Temple of Delphi, know thyself. By knowing ourselves, we can start to say, okay, I could go to therapist A and have hypnotherapy and they've fixed me, but now I'm dependent on them.
Yeah,
Rather than
absolutely.
what that you're doing is you're saying, hey, here's your garden, here are
Yeah.
the seeds. Now you need to go and plant them and you need to tend to them and you need to build resilience through your practice because these weather patterns are going to come in.
Yes, exactly. They are. And unfortunately, like you say, the thunder, the lightning, stress stuff will go in our stress bucket that we can't help. But yeah, the solution focused mind is absolutely all the tools for that
Mm,
garden and how to look after it during those times. And the one certainty we have in our lives is we always have ourselves. We have to live with ourselves for the rest of
mm,
our lives. We don't have any other guarantees. Be the best version of themselves, I think, is a nice way to
mm.
put it.
I want to talk about the concept of trance states, because this is often misunderstood. I've done some research on this. I know from functional MRI studies that the brain in hypnosis
Mm.
shows distinct patterns of activity, particularly in the anterior cingulate cortex
Yeah.
and lateral prefrontal areas. How would you explain these neurological processes to clients? And how does this understanding inform your therapeutic approach?
The way we talk about trance to clients, first thing we say is trance is a really ordinary state. Normally, we drop into it every 7 minutes. However, if we're very stressed, our brain will keep checking out because it's desperately trying to catch up on everything. Using the words catching up chimes with them because they think, yeah, I never feel like I can catch up. And I'll generally at that point say, yeah, I wake up and I'm exhausted and I can't go to sleep. It's that kind of notion of trance allows them to catch up. I think I touched on the brain waves as well. I try not to go too scientific at that point because I just want them to feel this is going to be a really pleasant experience. But we do, as I said before, talk about it replicates that REM sleep. So it's like giving yourself a little bit of REM. And I think, oh, great, because you said REM was good. So if I have a little bit more, that's going to help me empty that stress bucket. And we talk about how when the brain relaxes, a relaxed brain moves into that intellectual place. It moves into that left prefrontal cortex where we can decision make and be practical. So during that trance, depending on which brain wave you dropped into, one guy said, oh, I've just planned out my entire new kitchen whilst I've been in trance. And he was delighted because he was like, I've been trying to do that forever and it just wouldn't come to me because his brain couldn't relax enough to sit into that flow, that frequency, and tapping into that. Then we talk about how once you come out of trance, you'll either drop into a nice deep sleep, which will get you into REM and empty that stress bucket, or if you're listening in the morning, you'll come to and you'll be in that intellectual brain. Now, when you're in that intellectual brain, you make better decisions and you put less in your stress bucket. When there's less in your bucket, when you go to sleep, it's easier to empty what's in. It's the start of a very important process. It takes a small amount of time, but the main thing to take away is your brain will deeply relax. I also say to them, on days you listen, you perhaps don't feel you've relaxed as much, you'll still have relaxed more than before you were listening to it. One guy who's coming to me at the moment, he relaxes very deeply in the sessions, but he said, my brain just goes really crazy at home. And I said, because here you're away from all those distractions. At home, you've got everything around you. And he was like, when we give that little piece of education, rather than saying, what you should do is you should do this, he was like, I might go into a different room and do it. I think that might help. And then it's, yes, and that's you've decided that. But that trance just chips away at that kind of stress and state of, I don't know what to do.
I love the way you address the scientific legitimacy of hypnotic states.
Yeah, it's a fascinating one, isn't it? Because our
Hmm.
brains come up with all sorts of stuff at that point, and people will say to me, "Where did that come from?" And I'll say, "It's your brain fitting things into templates." Like I said about dreams, if I'm very stressed, I'll have a dream that my mum, who has passed away 17 years ago, I'll dream that she's dying again and she's died. Because my brain's got that little template of difficult things, mum died, let's use that. It can be the same in trance. I had one woman who I read a perfectly innocent metaphor to her during her trance, and her brain made really disturbing images out of it because it was desperately trying to process all of this
Hmm.
trauma out of her stress bucket. It was like, how do we do this? There's a balloon in this. Let's jump out of the balloon and take a child with us. I spoke to my supervisor about it, and he said, you could have read anything. You could have read the phone book, and her brain would have been making it into these awful images because it's desperately trying to move stuff out that stress bucket.
I would imagine when you have someone coming with a full stress bucket are in a state of preoccupation
Yes,
as distinct from free occupation, which
absolutely.
is when you go into trance, you come into that inner environment where you can be free occupied, like
Just
active rest.
You've touched on a really good point there, Peter, as well. And circling back, you asked me the sort of things that make people think, oh, this is different, this will help me about what I do, is that people are told practice mindfulness, do meditation, do yoga. All of these things are really wonderful. And I do all those things myself. However, if your stress bucket is full and you're spending all your time in your primitive fight flight brain, where we can only experience anxiety, anger, and depression, sitting down and trying to be mindful or trying to meditate is incredibly difficult because you just can't access that state you want to access. I had a chap come to me and he said, I've been trying meditation, but I keep falling asleep because his stress bucket's so full. He can't concentrate and his body just goes, oh, I need a rest. It's helping people get into a better place where they can take advantage of all these other wonderful things that are available to help. I always say to people, I'm not saying this is going to solve all your problems, but it will clear enough clutter that you can look around you and go, oh my God, physiotherapist, definitely need to go and see one of them, or a shiatsu practitioner or a personal trainer. It will make clear enough stuff that you can take advantage of all the other streams of help that are available.
I was reading a piece of research in behavioral psychology, and there was a suggestion that pattern interruption can be more effective than direct intervention for
Mm.
certain types of behavioral change. How does this align with your experience of helping clients create sustainable transformations without directly confronting their issues? What mechanisms make this indirect approach so effective?
I think the biggest thing is that they decide what they're going to do. So rather than me telling a 55-year-old man, you should do this, I'm simply asking the right questions, giving them tools to help them come to that decision themselves. That goes back to them gaining more control, feeling braver, like you said, and also they can try it, and if it doesn't work, no one will be like, did it work? Because it always works for everybody. It works for everybody else. I always say to people, try it. If it doesn't work, just try something else. I've had a client with OCD. She'd had lots of interventional therapy where people forcing her to do the things she hates doing, and that trying to make her not frightened of it anymore, which it absolutely didn't. It made her very stressed and frightened. When she came to see me, she felt she was gaining agency over the OCD and gaining more control in her life. The biggest thing she came away with was, I need to give myself more time. She's a musician, so she was traveling to London to work. I'll plan in an extra hour, and if that means I'm sitting reading a book for 45 minutes in a tube station, that's what I'm doing, and that's fine because I'm not stressed. I think that's what makes it so effective, is that it gives that person agency over what they need in their lives.
What do I need to expend? What do I need to maintain? What do I need to be
Yeah.
custodial to?
Yeah, that is a big thing. And I think that's another thing people don't necessarily realize. I certainly didn't when I began this process. What do I need to remove? Never mind adding. What do I need to take away from my life? I saw a really nice thing on LinkedIn that said growth is not always about pushing yourself to grow, it's about removing what's stopping you. We've got a really nice passage in one of our trances, which is all about weeding your garden, like you said, removing the weeds. Even a little tree can look really healthy, providing it's not surrounded by weeds. The way you described it of gardening perfectly fits into that.
It's not so much what you can add to your life, it's more about what you could subtract from your
Yeah,
life.
absolutely.
Because people are busy adding and adding, and that fills their stress bucket. If you start
Absolutely.
subtracting, you come into more of the essence of who you want to become. So,
Yes.
like the 17-year-old
Yes.
who's becoming an advocate for themselves,
Yes.
then you relegate those things into the expendable ray of your contemplation. So you know what you need to maintain and you know what you
Yes.
need to be custodial to.
Absolutely. Put so well. Absolutely. Like you said about the three parts, people acknowledging that there are different parts of them and
Yeah.
they all need treating differently. You're absolutely right. I think is one of the biggest things is that realization all of this is too much and I don't want most of it in my life anymore, or these people or this job or whatever it is. I could actually get rid of a lot of this and it would make
Yeah.
my life a lot easier.
Looking at the role of the subconscious mind in behavior
Mm.
change, there's compelling evidence that many of our decisions are made before we are consciously aware of them. How does hypnotherapy leverage this understanding to create change at the subconscious level? And what makes these changes more sustainable than purely conscious interventions?
We call that automatic behavior. Subconscious, as you say, it's ticking over all the time and it's full of beliefs, some of them helpful, some of them not helpful. We've established those beliefs since we were tiny little people. Again, it comes into using the trance. So when we explain trance to people, we say to them, we're not going to brainwash you. We're not going to tell your brain what to think. All that we do in trance is your subconscious is listening and we're helping embed some more helpful beliefs in it. When people listen to the relaxation, I only give them one and they just listen to that one, but they'll sometimes say to me, have you given me several different ones? Because I feel like I'm hearing a different relaxation each night. And I say, no, it's your brain picking out the bits it wants. It'll check out if there's a load of stuff it thinks, don't need that today. And then there's a load of stuff about confidence, maybe, or boundaries. It thinks, oh, yeah, that's interesting. And it absorbs it. But if we change our behavior and we are spending more time in our rational mind, sometimes those old beliefs could come into our head, the unhelpful ones. But at that moment, we go, no, I don't think that anymore. That's ridiculous. Why did I ever think that? Or I've got the strength now to not act on that. I can start to move away and build a different set of behaviors. After a while, of course, the subconscious can just go, oh, okay, we believe this now. This is better. We like this more. Because when we do trance, the intellectual brain and the primitive brain are focusing on the same thing. That's what gives us access to that subconscious. It's a really powerful thing, but we can change it bit by bit.
That whole relationship between stress reduction and improved sleep and behavioral
Mm.
change seems to create a constructive feedback loop. How do you prioritize and sequence interventions to maximize this synergistic effect?
We always keep the same structure in our sessions. Like you said, there's that structure, but there's freedom within it. We start with what's been good. We would never say, so how's your sleep? Or so how's this? But one of two things can happen. They can either never mention it again, which is what happens quite a lot. They come to me because they want to drink less alcohol, but actually they never mention it again because that problem has gone away. Or during that what's been good, they tell me this has been so much better and this has been so much better. And I say, why has it been so much better? What difference has it made? It's been so much better, I think, because I've done this and this. So I'm getting the feedback. They take that information away, or I might say to them, jot that down in your book now. They'll go, a thought has just come into my head. I've just suddenly thought, if that's been better this week, why don't I do this? And moving forward, I could do this. So you get that synergy of moving from, we've just been chatting about what's been good this week. but all these wonderful chemicals are flowing, and they're then putting all these pieces together, and they're off on their own lane, and I have to pull them back almost.
Rein them in.
They're giving themselves feedback.
Mm.
They're moving into, like you said, the synergy, the own frequency, and they're going forward. Sometimes the kind of momentum they gain during that is incredible. I don't know if that answers your question, but pick something else out of it if you want me to elaborate.
I was interested in the synergistic effect to examine the interconnected nature of healing.
Yes.
Each individual's neural architecture and
Yes.
life experience is unique. How do you adapt your approach while maintaining the core scientific principles? And I'm particularly interested in how you balance the standardized protocols with individualized treatment.
That's a really good question, Peter, because it is something that another therapist sort of threw at me in quite a vicious way once. I would say language is a big one. Depending on who you're talking to, you pick up quickly from meeting somebody, whether they're extremely nervous or whether they have very short attention span. Maybe they're neurodiverse, so you might explain things in slightly different ways. My husband has ADHD, so I tend to pick up on if someone's got ADHD very fast and start to think we need short bursts of information here. You need a fidget toy. So although I'm delivering essentially the same information, this person is very stressed. They're struggling to sit still. They're struggling to be here. Half the information is enough for today. When they come for their next session, we can drip feed that information through. They don't need the rest of that. What they need is the basics. They need to know me, and they need some tools to go away with. So there's quite a lot of space to work to the client's needs. Even with children, sometimes you would deliver perfectly adult information to a child. Then you meet an adult and you have to give them the kind of child's version. There's plenty of room to adapt my language, what I'm delivering. I attend online group supervision. These are often the questions that come up. How can I ask this question differently? We were talking the other week about doing solution-focused hypnotherapy for the terminally ill, which is something a friend of mine did for her own father recently. And it was amazing for the entire family. Instead of asking them what's been good, we can ask, what are you proud of? What are you looking forward to? So within our structure, we can adapt it for the client, for the mood they're in. If they're in a really foul mood, which sometimes they are, it's finding ways of asking the questions so they don't feel attacked. Sometimes if we're really struggling, okay, let's do a longer trance today. Let's not spend so long on the talk therapy. Let's give them a really nice long trance. And then, as if by magic, when they come out of their trance, they're a lovely, well-mannered, nice person. And you think, job done. That's great. That's what they needed today. So there's always room to shift the boundaries.
Sure. With any kind of sustainability of change that depends on both neurological rewiring and practical life integration, can you share any insights on how you help clients bridge the gap between the transformative state experienced in sessions and their daily life challenges?
Yes, that's a really good question, because obviously we've all been on those moments where we feel incredibly inspired and then we walk away and go, nah, can't be bothered. The biggest thing is the step they decide on in the miracle question being so small, because it's such a tiny thing they choose. And I always say to them, I'm never going to check up on you because it's none of my business. So immediately they don't think, oh my God, I have to have done it because she's going to ask me. It's them feeling they've been let off the hook to not do a great big thing, to just do a very small thing. It might be that they change their mind about that step and they do something else. But I think that's the biggest bridge between those two states, is the minuscule, tiny little goal that they pick. Often they come back to me and say, I did that, and then I did this, and I've decided I'm going to do that now.
It's the small steps that take them into a bigger world.
Absolutely.
Not all steps are equivalent.
Definitely. The way one client described it to me was, he said, I feel now I'm on the staircase and I used to think, God, I have to take this giant step up. Now I look at it and I think, maybe if I loosened my trousers or took my shoes off, the next step might be a bit easier because I only have to take that next one. And he doesn't feel that, oh my God, everyone else is taking these giant leaps and steps. That's where client stories help me telling stories of other clients to clients. So they're like, oh, someone else struggled with this. That's a nice way to give advice to clients, tell a story about someone else in their same situation, because then they think, oh, that's a good idea, rather than their primitive brain going, stop telling me what to do. I don't like this. It's not nice.
Storytelling is an ancient practice.
Yes.
That's how we learn, is through stories. Within behavioral change, it's not a question of oh, I do this, then that happens, because behaviors follows a non-linear path.
Definitely.
Progress occurs in unexpected ways. How do you help clients recognize and document these changes, particularly when the improvements might manifest in areas they weren't initially focused on? What role does self-observation play in their tracking process?
Great question. Firstly, them writing down the what's been goods. So they've been writing those down in between the sessions, and I asked them to bring that with them. You think of a whole week and you've written something down at the beginning of the week, then I'm talking to you at the end of the week, having it written down so they can flick back in that book and I say, what's been good or what's been different? That's the key question. What's been different? Because if I ask them that, their brain's slightly gone in another direction of, oh, what's been different? But if they can flick back in that book, then go, oh yeah, I forgot I did that. There was a massive thing this week and I'd forgotten about it, because once things aren't a problem anymore, we stop thinking about them, don't we? So in order for that, like you say, that progress tracking to happen, we ask them to write it down, asking them what's been different and talking about what's been good, because the more they talk about it, the more serotonin flows, the more they get into the intellectual brain, and they'll go, oh, and this, and I forgot about this, and I didn't write this one down, but this happened. Usually by the end of that 20 minutes, they're giving me the really good stuff. Then when we go into the miracle question, they're like, oh, and another one. Can I just tell you about this one? Because this is a really massive one. That's where they get that progress tracking, which is why it's so important writing it down either in a book or on their phone. They get to experience those memories again, that wonderful feeling of happiness and achievement and joy. And of course, they get all the lovely chemicals. One guy came in and we did the what's been good. What we do at the end of that is we say, okay, put yourself on a scale for today. Where are you in terms of happiness? 0's the bottom, 10's the top. He said, I'm a 7 now, but when I walked in, I was a 2. He said, because we've actually stopped and talked about my achievements, I feel good. I feel a solid 7 now.
I imagine a client's perception of progress can at times lag behind actual behavioral changes. In a sense, you're helping clients maintain objective awareness of their progress, particularly during plateaus or when changes are gradual.
That's it, Peter. I can imagine if they're in a very deep, dark place, or they're just used to being miserable, and that's become their go-to state, they trudge in, what's been good, nothing's really happened this week. It would be very easy for that just to be the end of it. And you go, oh, all right then. Therefore, like you say, that there could be no recollection of all the good stuff that they've done, because in that moment they just feel miserable again. Yeah, absolutely.
Keira, your emphasis on the interconnectedness of stress, sleep, behavioral patterns, combined with your structured but flexible approach to measuring progress, offers a compelling framework for understanding therapeutic change. And the way you've articulated how solution-focused hypnotherapy can create a lasting transformation without dwelling on problems, challenges traditional therapeutic paradigms in the most constructive way. I'm really struck by how your background in physical disciplines like personal training and yoga has informed your understanding of the mind-body connection in
Yes.
hypnotherapy, and the
Yeah.
integration of physical and psychological well-being is especially relevant in our increasingly stressed modern world. Is
Yeah.
there any final wisdom you'd like to share with our listeners who might be considering hypnotherapy as a path to change?
Yeah. Something one of my clients said to me. So she was in such a bad place. She's Romanian, but she'd come over to live in England. She was in such a bad place that she said she nearly was going to leave her partner and move back to Romania because she just didn't know what else to do. She came to me for sessions, and The great piece of feedback she gave me was, she said, these sessions have made me see that I have a choice. I have a choice in what I say, how I react to things. If I'm going to be miserable, when I take a break at work, I have choice in my life. That's the feeling I get off most of my clients. And that's certainly the way I feel, is that there is a way to create space and choice in your life without going backwards. You can do it going forwards. I do this job because I've walked this walk. It's not been easy, but it has been so worth it. I would say to anyone out there who's feeling stuck and doesn't know where to turn, this is a great place to start.
Where can people find out about the work that you're doing?
I work face to face and online, so I can work with anybody, anywhere. Best place to find me is at my website, which is www.positivechangehypnotherapy.co.uk. There's lots of information, plus the relaxation on there, which you can grab.
Your insights into the intricate dance between neuroscience, hypnotherapy, and sustainable behavioral change have been truly illuminating in this conversation. One of the things that does stand out most powerfully is how you've woven together your personal transformation journey with evidence-based practice that creates an approach that honors both the science and the deeply human aspects of change. And your emphasis on the interconnectedness of stress, sleep, and behavioral patterns, combined with your structured yet flexible approach to measuring progress, offers a compelling framework for understanding therapeutic change. And the way you've articulated how solution-focused therapy can create lasting transformation without dwelling on problems, it really challenges traditional therapeutic paradigms in the most constructive way. So I want to thank you so much for this conversation and for sharing not only your professional expertise, but also your personal journey of discovery through hypnotherapy. Your candid insights and practical wisdom will undoubtedly inspire many who are seeking their path to transformation. Your work reminds me that change is not just possible, but sustainable when we understand and work with the natural capabilities of our minds and bodies.
Thank you, Peter. That's put so beautifully. Really wonderful. Thank you so much for being such a wonderful host.
How have you experienced the conversation today, Keira?
Oh, I've loved it, Peter. You're such a lovely person to talk to.
Are there any impressions you've had from the conversation for yourself?
I think it compounds the way I've been feeling in sort of real life, face-to-face people, of going with how things feel. If it doesn't feel right, don't do it. We had our chat and it was a really lovely chat. You're such a lovely person. You listen and you have loads of interesting things to say. You have a very integrated approach. You also use it in a very common sense, everyday way. Whereas when I was a yoga teacher, I met so many using spirituality in a really toxic way. Speaking to people like yourself feels like you're on the same wavelength of using these things in your everyday life because they make sense.
Brainwashing is easy, reasoning isn't.
Good point.